I don't know if the I don't know if the screener put the notes in about what I want to talk about, but the reason I called, other than that, was because, well, essentially, I'm a pretty new atheist, and I'm also African American, so I kind of feel like I'm part of two minorities there. And as far as my inner circle is concerned, I really don't, to my knowledge at least, know of anyone I can actually discuss these thoughts with. So I do have a main point that I want to get to, but I don't know how much time we have left. But if it's all right, if I could just sort of tell some of my story leading up to that point, if you allow me to do that, that would be great.
Sure, go ahead.
Sure. So like I said, I'm African American. I grew up predominantly in the Black community. And as far as I know, all my family, all my friends were Christian. And I don't know if you're, I don't know if you have a good perspective on what that really means in the Black community, but being Christian as part of the Black community is noticeably different than, I guess, the mainstream. It doesn't feel like, a bunch of people, made a choice. And of course, what you believe isn't a choice. It's product of, the different aspects of your life and everything. But it doesn't feel like it's part of a list of options that you had. It feels more like it is as part of you as your skin color or your...
It's a de facto identity. It's so ingrained in the culture.
Yeah, exactly. So, just kind of being brought up that way, people don't give you the benefit of the doubt that you may be something else. You're automatically seen as you're Christian. So you're not asked what religion you are, asked what church you go to, things like that.
Exactly.
So, growing up my whole life, I was religious, never the type to, walk door to door, or, give public testimonies of my faith or things like that. But I always definitely believed God was real and lived my whole life around that belief. But where it started for me was, as a kid, I was sort of always a lover of science and, natural world and all that. I loved asking questions. I remember the first real time that I had skeptical questions. I was probably between 8 and 10. It had to do with the idea of heaven.
Yeah.
I was always told that heaven was this perfect place, and you never be sad again. It's always happy, no fear, all that good stuff. And so, sometime as I was thinking about that, I just go, hey, it's gonna be great when I get to heaven. But wait, what if I die as an old man? Am I gonna stay an old man? I'd want to be a kid again. So it's like, sure, I'd probably be able to do that. Of course, you'd be able to have a choice like that. But, what about all my friends? Are they going to want to be kids again? Maybe they want to stay old men and women. I don't want to play with, old people. So, just kid thoughts like that.
Yeah.
That sort of came up, I thought about, and it just led to more and more questions. Even when it came to science, like I said, I never really fed into the fundamentalist ideas of rejecting things that we have demonstrably proven, like evolution, for instance. Back when I was a kid, I guess it was way more controversial than it is right now. But I never had a problem with it. I learned the science. It made sense to me, and so I kind of, instead of changing what I was accepting to be true about the sciences, I sort of had to tweak what I believed on the other side. So I would say things like God must be the biggest and wisest scientist of all. And, that's how I would sort of cope with what I've learned. So, fast forward, it's even close to my point. Fast forward, a few years down the line, more than a few years, but you get what I mean. I was on my way to my mother-in-law's house for dinner, and I got there a little earlier, so I was just waiting in the parking lot, and I decided to browse YouTube. And I remember this video I saw a while ago. It was this satirical take on the Garden of Eden story, and it's kind of funny. It was animated, and for some reason I just wanted to watch it again. So I started, typing in keywords, like Adam and Eve and animated angel, baby. There was some character that looked like that. And so I found it, as funny as I thought it, as I remembered it. And I saw that it wasn't just some kind of standalone video. It was actually made by some, YouTuber named Dark Matter 2525.
Yep.
And so I clicked on his video, and I saw he had I clicked on his channel and saw he had a whole, number of videos. And I started, I didn't start at that point. It was, when they dinner or whatever. The next day at work, I probably didn't get a whole lot done because I was just kind of going down that rabbit hole of watching those videos. And really that was the precursor to me stepping over the line of theist to atheist in a way. But eventually that led me to, how you go down those YouTube journeys and you get all these videos.
You can end up in incredibly strange places if you just keep trailing on down video after video.
Yeah, yes, you can. But in this case, it was a good thing because I stumbled on a guy named, at the time I had no idea who he was, but it was a guy named Sam Harris. I definitely know who he is now. He was giving a lecture on End of Faith in New York. And I watched the video. When I was done with the video, I was no longer Christian. I can't say every jot and tittle of my faith was gone after that, but yeah. I definitely was able to reflect in those few minutes and say, wow, it's like all this stuff came, there was the surface level stuff that never really broke through, but after I finished that video, it kind of had. And so I would say 78% of what I held on to as my faith left me at that point. And so after that, I just was obsessed with reading the books and watching the videos and trying to learn as much as I can. One of the first things I actually did was I actually decided to read my Bible because I understood if I was going to be, that's something that I never did growing up, cover to cover. I know that most Christians that I would, call my friends or family haven't either. And so if I was going to say that I don't believe this stuff in this book, I was at least going to be honest enough to say I actually have read it, and I can say that and don't, not feel like a hypocrite at the same time. So, I did that, read some other books, got introduced to the, Four Horsemen, Hitchens, Dawkins, Harris, and Dennett, the Trinity, you guys, so that Matt, and I know that you like to stay humble with these things, but you are, and I've been watching you for a long time. You are definitely one of my intellectual heroes. I know that you tend to say that it's not you that did it, it's me, and I agree. But you were definitely a precursor to that. So I really appreciate you and and Tracy and John and everyone else, Jen on the show, because that was Atheist Experience was a big part of at least being able to, in my mind, sort of illustrate valid thoughts and points to why I believe this way instead of the other way now.
Well, thank you.
That gives me...
That's very kind, and we're always happy to hear that what we've done is help people. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate it. I've been trying to get on the show for so long and talk to you guys about this, and I get to my point now. So I am married. I have 2 kids. My wife is great. I love her. I love everyone to death. The problem, of course, is my wife is very, very religious. Her entire family is very, very religious. Probably, a good chunk of them are or have been practicing ministers, and it's just so interwoven into the meta there that it's hard to escape. And like I said, I don't really have anyone I can talk to about it, so it's tough going for so long and just having all this stuff built in and basically being somebody you're not anymore. It really can get to me. And we've been married for a couple years now, and we've been married a couple years now, and what I'm wondering is how exactly do I approach her with this and come out, because I've been put in this charade for a long time, and it's just getting to the point where I literally can't do it anymore. I'm going to explode if I don't, come out to at least her. And it's hard because I feel like I've been on this, as far as my thought process of how she's going to take it, I feel like I've been on this spectrum of, at one point I'd say, oh, she's going to divorce me immediately, to, maybe we can work something out and she can see my point of view. depending on, conversations that we've had since the last time I thought about it, and just different things like that, that would affect whether I think, the way I think she'll react to it. And, what I would love to hear, of course, is for me to tell her, and then for her to say, you know what, I love you so much that I'm not going to let this get in the way of our marriage and our family, and we're going to figure a way to work this out. But that kind of seems like pie in the sky thinking sometimes. So that's why I called, to try to get some advice on how to approach this.
Cool.
Boy, that's a tough situation, because we don't know your wife. I don't personally have much experience coming out to family because I've never been religious, so it hasn't been an issue to me. I know Matt has. So it's hard for me to kind of put myself in your place. I think it sounds like you've done some thinking about how she might react. And it kind of all depends on what kind of fallout you're prepared to deal with. There's nothing wrong. Lots of people who are atheists or even questioning their faith stay in the closet for a while until it's safe to do so, depending on what the consequences are. A lot of people who've come out have, suffered pretty bad consequences from family and from community and from their entire support system. So it's kind of something for you to determine what's the fallout going to be, and am I willing to deal with those consequences? Yeah,
there's a few bits of kind of advice. First of all, there's, I think if you just Google atheist Charlotte, you'll find charlotteatheist.org. I know there's a number of other groups in that area. I've actually gone into North Carolina to do talks and stuff. Greta Christina has a book on coming out, how to do it, why, and she interviewed a bunch of people who came out. There's a lot of really good information in there. That's the first book I always recommend to people when they're talking about the coming out process. My standard thing is to just be you and to answer the questions honestly. When I would avoid the A label in initial conversations, be more like, hey, I don't believe the same things that I did before, or you need to realize that you are the person in the relationship who has changed, but that doesn't make it your fault. And so you're going to have to be a little more conciliatory to your wife. You're going to have to understand that she could have any number of responses. She could, lose her shit right away. She might need some time to think about it. She might tell you, I've always been suspicious and didn't really believe all this stuff in it either, which is what has happened to some people. When it comes to the coming out, I always recommend that, like John was saying, be sure you're ready to face all the possible consequences. There are very few people who in the long run have regretted letting people know. And I think, I'm always reluctant to give too much advice, because at the end you've got to do what's right for you. But I think if you've got a good communicative relationship with your wife, that letting her know that you still love her, this isn't about her, this isn't about rebellion, you have, through your investigations, come to no longer believe something you believe, and that you want her to know because she's part of your life, and that you want to do everything you can to make sure this doesn't, severely impact your relationship. I know couples who have made it work, and I know ones that haven't. But the other thing to remember is, I guess I'll do this here today, since we already mentioned it on Facebook. It's not like marriages don't fail all over the place anyway. I'm currently in the process of getting divorced, and I married an atheist. That's why one of the reasons I was noting earlier this fantasy that we're fed about finding the perfect person and living happily ever after. You have to deal with reality on reality's terms, and you have to do the thing that's right for you and for your kids and your wife. I mean, you do have kids, right?
2 kids.
Yeah,
you said that. They have to be the priority in this, and the decisions made have to be done with respect to their life. And I don't have any doubt that you'll do that. You guys, I'm sure you both love your kids. I'm sure that you guys are going to find a way to work through it. And the only thing I continually say is, don't do the big, please sit down, there's something important I need to tell you, because all that does is build up a drama ahead of time.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I mean, my wife is a pretty reasonable person. I want to say with everything except religion. I've tried to bring up conversations before, but I didn't want to get too into it for her to be suspicious of why I was actually talking about these things. But
yeah.
I've come to the conclusion that I think she told me at one point that she believed the Bible literally. And so, immediately I'm thinking, oh, great, this isn't even going to be, this is definitely not going to be the conversation now.
I wouldn't be too worried about that.
But
I've met a lot of people who say they believe the Bible literally, and after a few minutes of conversation, it turns out that they're using the word literally figuratively. And we all do that. I almost did it earlier today. I almost did the literally you said. Literally is one of the most overused words, and often, and I don't mean to suggest that your wife or anybody else is being disingenuous, but the fact is, I've been around believers my entire life, and there is one thing that you will find in almost every, especially fundamentalist believer: hyperbole. I know that Jesus Christ is Lord. I literally believe everything in that book is fact. There are no errors in that book. There's no contradictions. There's no this. It's all exaggerated because there's a fear in every believer that the uncertainties and the questions that they have and the things that don't quite make sense, that could lead them to where you are, where I am. And in order to defend against this fear, the solution is to exaggerate. The solution is to say, just let me take all those fears and concerns and put them in a box and straight out of Book of Mormon and crush it by exaggerating how confident I am in things.
Yeah. Yeah, and what was I going to say? I don't know. I guess you're right. I mean, I guess that doesn't matter too much, and there could be little loose use of the definition literal there.
The other thing about that, with the literalists, they're the ones that are essentially prime targets to get them, to convince them that they are not justified in their belief. The more moderate, liberal, non-literalist people, they've already rationalized away the problems. The more fundamentalist and literal someone views, for example, the Bible and Christianity, the easier their beliefs are to attack because they are making assertions that will crumble when faced with facts and science and, sound epistemology, which is why the guy that called in earlier that wants to not argue with the Bible and not argue necessarily for Christianity, he just goes to this vague God. It's the same reason that when I'm in a debate with a prominent Christian theologist, they very, very, very rarely defend anything doctrinally, anything about Jesus or Christianity specifically. We keep having this same debate of, is there a God? And they defend the most abstract notion they can because it's the best they can possibly do. And in the interpersonal stuff, when people who aren't actually experts or people who have just been raised in their religion all the time, not only are they going to engage in this hyperbole, but when you, with some love and compassion, explain to them why you don't believe the thing that they believe, there are ways to have that discussion where it can be incredibly productive to either say, okay, well, we just don't agree, or I'll think about that some more. But you got to remember that she's going to feel under threat from the very beginning, and that part is on you, not your fault, but you have to own it.
Yeah, I know. And that's why I've been trying to basically prime my brain with explanations and discussions and counter-apologetics and anything I could think of to be able to address anything she might come up with, which is kind of why I've waited so long. I mean, I've made these soft deadlines, when my wife was pregnant, after she gives birth because this is too stressful. I'll tell her. And then, oh, no, wait, let's wait till he grows up at least a few months, so it's not so hard to take care of him if something like that was going to happen. And, well, no, it's now, well, after I read the Bible, then I'll be able to, now be ready to do it. But then I kind of thought, well, maybe it's just because I've never had this conversation before with anyone. So if I'm able to do that, maybe, and not do it in the comfort of not thinking that somebody's going to lash back out at me, then I'd be comfortable in having a conversation with her, which, is why this was sort of the hard deadline. I wanted to have a conversation with somebody first and then I'd tell. And you're right. I've heard the line of think I'm not going to, do the big dramatic sit down, let's have a talk.
I have another
to YouTube or whatever.
I have a weird suggestion for you, and this is entirely up to you, but this is the first time you will have had this conversation with anybody. And there's a process that you're getting ready to start. I think it might be interesting, if you have the forethought to do it in the time, to keep a diary, even if you don't normally, over this period of time, about the nature of the conversations, the responses, because I think that could be useful to other people as, here was my experience with dealing this. And also it can be useful to the two of you to look back and say, hey, you remember when we had this, knockdown, drag out fight over whether or not, Adam had one fewer rib than Eve or whatever, that it gives some grounding to this conversation, because you're not the only one who's going to have this conversation for the first time. And that could be incredibly useful to people. And I think of that because people will ask me to recall, how did this interaction go? And I can barely remember because our memories are flawed and because we repaint things. Like I know there were conversations I had with my mom that I am now actively misremembering, just because we don't have the full notes of it. So, just a thought.
Yeah, I've never considered that, but that sounds like a great idea. Actually, I'll do that.
Well, and I would also say,
I know we're coming. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I would also say there's no reason to be in a hurry. It's good to. I understand that you want to be your authentic self with your wife, but you don't want to put her on the defensive either. And have her think she needs to fight against it or talk you out of it. So I think your idea that you mentioned earlier of floating little trial balloons, hey, what do you think about that? Do you think the world is literally flooded higher than the mountaintops, and where did all that water go, or whatever, just to kind of feel out, when it comes down to it, what does her logical, skeptical brain think of these things that she's been taught? And avoid the, I don't believe any of this stuff anymore. What do you think? Because that's like a bombshell, and that's not going to help.
Right. I'm going to be careful in parsing my words, but
I tell you though, Mac.
Yeah, I guess.
So we've run out of time for today, but I do want you to, as you go through this process, touch base with us on occasion. Let us know how things are going, because I think that stuff like this is going to be useful to a lot of people who are watching the show. We try to prioritize theist callers, but we're building communities and communities of people who have let go of religion. And I think stories like yours are important to everybody.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'll definitely keep track of what's going on, because, I'd love to be able to help somebody else in this situation, like, the same way I've been looking for help in this situation myself. So I really appreciate you guys taking my call. It's been a long time coming. Like I said, Matt, I can't even believe I just have a conversation with you. And so, yeah, thanks for having me.
Then your standards of evidence are a little too high, because it actually happened and there's a recording of it. But anyway, I appreciate you, Mac. Please keep back in touch with us. Thanks for the call.
Yeah, thanks, Mac.
Good luck.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.